Most men don't leave when they're emotionally empty. They stay, and they quietly disappear while standing right in front of you. If you think you'd notice when a man feels emotionally unfulfilled, you're wrong. The most dangerous signs are the subtle ones, the ones that feel normal until it's too late. You shouldn't have to guess what's going on inside the man you care about. But the truth is, most emotionally unfulfilled men don't cry, complain, or confess. They change in quiet ways. They respond a little slower, they smile a little less. They start using distractions like work, their phone, or their routines to avoid what they feel but don't understand. And if you're paying attention, these changes aren't random. They follow a pattern that tells you he isn't just tired, he's emotionally empty. And once you can see these subtle shifts, you stop blaming yourself and you start understanding what's really happening beneath the surface. If this is starting to sound familiar, take a second to like this video and subscribe. You deserve clarity, not confusion. And if you want stronger connections in your life, stay with me, because the next signs may be the ones you've been overlooking. Emotional distance doesn't always look like anger. Most of the time it doesn't look dramatic at all. It looks quiet, it looks calm, it looks like nothing is wrong. And that's exactly why so many people miss it. When someone becomes emotionally distant, you don't always see shouting, arguing, or cold behavior. Instead, you notice small changes. He still shows up, he still talks, he still laughs, but something feels different. The energy feels thinner, the connection feels lighter. You feel like you're talking to him, but not fully reaching him. Silence isn't always the absence of words. Sometimes it's the absence of depth. Conversations stay at the surface. He talks about work, routines, and daily life, but avoids real feelings. He doesn't open up the way he used to, not because he doesn't care, but because he doesn't know how to express what he's going through. And here's the confusing part. He might still be kind, he might still be respectful, he might still care about you. Emotional distance doesn't mean he stopped caring, it means he stopped connecting on a deeper level. He learned how to keep things steady, controlled, and safe instead of open, expressive, and honest. People often expect emotional distance to be loud. They expect slammed doors, raised voices, or clear rejection. But real emotional distance is quiet. It shows up in slow replies, shorter answers, less curiosity about your thoughts and feelings, less vulnerability. He becomes present in body, but missing in spirit. This doesn't always come from a bad place. Sometimes he's overwhelmed. Sometimes he's tired. Sometimes he's carrying emotions he never learned how to talk about. And instead of expressing them, he hides them behind calmness and silence. The danger isn't the silence itself. The danger is what it creates. It creates confusion. You start wondering if you're imagining things. You start questioning your own instincts. You tell yourself, he seems fine, while your heart feels disconnected. Emotional distance isn't about drama. It's about disconnection. It's about being close to someone who feels far away. And the sooner you understand that silence can be a sign of emotional emptiness, the sooner you can stop blaming yourself, because sometimes the loudest signal isn't noise, it's quiet. One of the most subtle signs a man has been emotionally unfulfilled is that he can be right beside you, but feel miles away. He's there in the room, he hears your words, he responds politely, but something important is missing: his emotional presence. This doesn't show up as anger, it doesn't show up as drama, it shows up as a quiet withdrawal that's easy to miss if you're not paying attention. You might notice that he used to be curious about your thoughts and feelings. He used to ask real questions. He used to laugh more freely. But now the conversations stay on the surface, safe, predictable, short. It's not that he doesn't care, it's that he's learned to protect himself. When a man spends a long time feeling emotionally unfulfilled, he slowly teaches himself not to expect too much, not to reach too far, not to risk being disappointed again. So instead of asking for more connection, he lowers his emotional investment. He becomes present with his body, but guarded with his heart. You may feel like you're talking to him, but not fully reaching him. Like your words are landing, but not staying. Like he listens, but he doesn't open up in return. This isn't coldness, it's quiet exhaustion. He's learned how to survive emotional disappointment by pulling back just enough to avoid feeling it again. He stops sharing what worries him. He stops explaining what frustrates him. He stops showing the softer parts of himself because those parts were ignored or misunderstood before. And here's what makes this so subtle. He can still be kind. He can still be respectful. He can still show up, but the warmth feels muted. The spark feels restrained. When a man is emotionally fulfilled, he leans into connection naturally. He wants to be understood. He wants to feel seen. He wants to participate emotionally. But when he's learned that opening up leads to emptiness, he does the opposite. He stays calm, controlled, distant. And the hardest part, he often doesn't even realize he's doing it. It becomes his normal, his default, his emotional comfort zone. That's why this sign is missed so often. Because it's quiet, it's polite, it doesn't cause conflict. But emotionally, he's slowly disappearing. A subtle sign a man has been emotionally unfulfilled is his quiet reluctance to talk about what's happening inside him and what he truly wants for his future. It's not that he lies. It's not that he shuts you down harshly. It's much quieter than that. He simply changes the subject. He gives short answers. He keeps things vague, not because he has nothing to say, but because he doesn't believe anyone really wants to hear it. When a man has spent a long time feeling unseen emotionally, he starts to believe that his thoughts, dreams, and worries don't matter. So instead of sharing them, he keeps them neatly tucked away. You might ask questions about what he's thinking, what he wants, or how he feels about the future, and his responses sound neutral, practical, or unfinished. I haven't really thought about it. It's not a big deal. We'll see what happens. On the surface, this looks like calmness. But underneath, it's emotional self-protection. Talking about inner thoughts requires vulnerability, and vulnerability, for someone who has felt emotionally neglected, feels risky. It means hoping, it means trusting, it means risking disappointment. So he chooses the safer option, silence. He becomes very good at discussing practical things, work, tasks, plans, schedules. But when it comes to emotions, fears, and personal hopes, his words dry up, not because he's empty, but because he's learned not to expect emotional space. You can feel the gap during quiet moments. When deep conversations could happen, he gently steers away. He might use humor or distraction disguised as productivity. Anything to avoid revealing what he hasn't learned how to express safely. And this isn't about weakness, it's about history. Men who have felt emotionally fulfilled tend to speak naturally about their inner life. They don't always have the perfect words, but they try. They believe their feelings have a place to land. But a man who's been emotionally unfulfilled often believes that sharing those feelings will only make him feel smaller, ignored, or misunderstood. So he keeps them locked away, not because he doesn't trust you personally, but because he doesn't trust the process of opening up. The subtlety of this sign is what makes it powerful. There is no confrontation, no arguments, no breakdowns, just a quiet emotional distance built from too many moments of feeling unheard. And unless someone gently creates safety for him, he will stay in that silent place, believing it's easier than hoping again. One of the quietest signs a man has been emotionally unfulfilled is his strong need to handle everything on his own. At first, this can look like strength. He seems independent. He seems capable. He seems steady. But underneath that independence is often a long history of feeling like he had no safe place to land emotionally. When he stopped expecting emotional support, he didn't announce it. He just adjusted, slowly, carefully. He learned that it was safer to process things alone than risk being ignored, judged, or misunderstood. So instead of sharing when he feels overwhelmed, stressed, or confused, he quietly carries it himself. You might notice that he rarely talks about what's weighing on him. He doesn't complain much. He doesn't vent. He doesn't seek comfort. When something goes wrong, he says, "It's fine." When something hurts him, he brushes it off. Not because he isn't affected, but because he doesn't want to feel like a burden. This self-reliance becomes emotional armor. It protects him from disappointment, but it also isolates him. A man who has felt emotionally supported learns that it's okay to lean on someone. He understands that sharing doesn't make him weak. But a man who has felt emotionally starved learns the opposite. he learns that asking for help leads nowhere, so he stops asking. He becomes the person who fixes things instead of feeling things, who solves problems instead of talking about them. He keeps moving, keeps functioning, keeps handling life, all while quietly carrying emotional weight by himself. This doesn't make him cold. It makes him tired. You can see it in small moments, when something stressful happens and he doesn't reach out, when he handles difficult situations silently, when he listens to others' problems but never speaks about his own. And the hardest part is this: he may not even recognize this as loneliness. He calls it maturity. He calls it control. He calls it not making a big deal out of things. But what it really is emotional survival. He learned how to survive without support, not because he didn't need it, but because he didn't receive it. And over time, surviving became normal. Being alone emotionally became familiar. This is why this sign is so subtle. It doesn't look like pain, it looks like strength. But behind that calm, capable surface is often a man who learned that no one was coming to meet him where he was. And once someone does create that space for him, slowly, safely, without pressure, that armor starts to soften. A very subtle sign a man has been emotionally unfulfilled is the way he reacts to emotional closeness. It's confusing because part of him wants connection, but another part of him feels deeply uncomfortable with it. So when moments of real closeness appear, he becomes slightly tense, slightly guarded, or unexpectedly quiet. This isn't rejection, it's unfamiliarity. When someone has lived without emotional fulfillment for a long time, emotional closeness feels like a language they were never taught to speak fluently. They may want to open up but don't know how to stay relaxed while doing it. It feels vulnerable in a way that makes their mind go into protection mode. You might notice that when conversations start becoming more meaningful, he suddenly changes the topic. Not because he doesn't care, but because closeness feels overwhelming. It brings up feelings he hasn't sorted through yet. It pushes him into an emotional space he doesn't fully understand. He may pull back slightly after deep moments of connection, not disappear, not shut you out, but soften his emotional presence a little. This isn't manipulation, this is instinct. When closeness feels unfamiliar, the brain looks for safety, and distance feels safer than openness. There is an internal conflict happening that you can't see. One part of him wants warmth, understanding, and connection. Another part of him is scared of what happens if he gets used to that kind of closeness and then loses it. That fear doesn't always come from you. It comes from old experiences, old disappointments, old patterns of being emotionally invisible. So he walks a careful line. Close, but not too close. Open, but not fully open. Connected, but still protected. And this can be difficult to understand from the outside. You might wonder why he hesitates when things feel good, why he slows down emotionally right when the connection deepens. But the answer isn't that he doesn't feel anything. The answer is that emotional fulfillment still feels unfamiliar to him. He doesn't yet trust that closeness can be safe, stable, and lasting. He doesn't believe he won't be abandoned, misunderstood, or emotionally shut out again. So even in beautiful moments, his nervous system stays slightly alert. Over time, with patience and emotional safety, this slowly softens. But without that safety, he stays stuck in this pattern of wanting connection while being afraid of it. This is one of the most misunderstood signs because it looks like disinterest when it's actually self-protection. It looks like distance when it's really fear. But underneath it all, there is a real desire to feel close, just wrapped in years of emotional caution. Another subtle sign a man has been emotionally unfulfilled is how rarely he speaks about what he truly needs emotionally. It's not that he doesn't have needs. It's that he's learned to shrink them, to minimize them, to tell himself they aren't important enough to bring up. You might notice that when he's going through something difficult, he downplays it. He says things like, "It's not that serious," or "Other people have it worse," or "It doesn't matter." These aren't honest emotional responses, they're protective habits. When someone repeatedly feels ignored or unsupported, they learn that expressing needs only leads to disappointment. So instead of asking for comfort or understanding, he teaches himself to stay quiet. He convinces himself that needing something makes him weak, inconvenient, or difficult to deal with. Over time, this becomes his emotional language: silence, self-control, and self-denial. He may listen carefully to other people's needs. He may show up consistently for others. But when it comes to himself, he stays small. He doesn't ask for reassurance. He doesn't ask for patience. He doesn't ask for space when he needs it. He just carries it all quietly. The dangerous part is that even he starts to believe he doesn't need much. He disconnects from his own emotional awareness. He stops recognizing what he actually feels. He stops labeling emotions clearly because he's had so much practice ignoring them. This doesn't make him dramatic or unstable. It makes him emotionally invisible even to himself. You may feel that something is happening inside him that you can't reach, that he's present but not fully open, not fully honest about his inner experience. And that's because he isn't being dishonest with you. He's being dishonest with himself without even realizing it. A man who feels emotionally fulfilled naturally expresses needs. It feels safe to say, "I'm struggling." It feels safe to say, "I need support." But a man who's been emotionally starved believes that asking for emotional help just adds pressure to the other person, so he chooses silence instead of risk. He chooses strength instead of softness. He chooses control instead of connection. And none of this is loud. None of this is obvious. It's quiet. It's polite. It's invisible. That's why this sign is so often overlooked, because it doesn't look like pain. It looks like calmness. It looks like maturity. It looks like stability. But underneath, he is carrying emotional weight that was never given a place to rest. A subtle sign a man has been emotionally unfulfilled is how carefully he protects himself, even during moments that feel safe. He may be smiling, listening, and present, but emotionally, there is always a quiet wall standing just behind his words. It's not coldness, it's not lack of care, it's conditioning. When someone has lived through long periods of emotional disappointment, they learn to move through relationships with caution. Instead of expecting connection, they expect misunderstandings. Instead of expecting support, they expect silence. So they build emotional habits designed to keep them from getting hurt again. He might share small stories, but avoids anything too personal. He might express opinions, but avoids revealing how deeply he feels. He keeps things light, controlled, predictable. You can sense it in the way he reacts to emotional moments. When conversations turn softer or more meaningful, his body language changes slightly. His tone becomes more neutral. His warmth becomes measured. He's not shutting you out. He's regulating himself. This guard isn't about you. It's about memory. His mind learned somewhere in the past that too much vulnerability created discomfort, rejection, or emotional distance. So now, even when safety exists, his instincts tell him to stay protected. He isn't calculating. He isn't manipulating. He is surviving the way he learned. What makes this difficult is that he can still care deeply, he can still be thoughtful, he can still feel connection, but he never allows those feelings to fully surface. He keeps them under control, like holding the volume knob of his emotions slightly lower than they naturally want to be. And over time, this emotional restraint becomes his personality. People describe him as calm, steady, easygoing, but what they don't see is how much he filters before he speaks, how much he edits before he feels. A man who is emotionally fulfilled feels safe enough to be spontaneous with his emotions. He can laugh freely, react openly, speak from the heart without hesitation. But an emotionally unfulfilled man practices emotional discipline instead of emotional expression. He chooses safety over truth. He chooses calm over vulnerability. He chooses control over closeness. And again, this isn't dramatic. This isn't loud, it's quiet, it's subtle, and that's why it's so often missed. He isn't obviously distressed, he isn't causing problems, he isn't pushing people away aggressively, he's just carefully limiting how much of himself anyone gets to see. And unless someone creates a space where he feels truly safe over time, he will keep wearing that emotional armor, not because he wants distance, but because that's the only way he learned to feel safe. A subtle sign a man has been emotionally unfulfilled is the way he seeks reassurance without asking for it outright. He rarely says, "Do you care about me?" or "Am I enough?" Instead, he drops hints, watches reactions carefully, or shares small glimpses of his vulnerabilities to see if anyone notices or responds. This behavior can be so subtle that it's easy to miss, but it's a window into his inner emotional state. When a man has gone long periods without feeling emotionally seen or supported, he starts to internalize the belief that expressing need directly might not be safe or effective. So instead of asking for validation openly, he creates situations where reassurance can be offered naturally, allowing him to test whether it's safe to trust others with his feelings. He might lightly joke about being unsure, mention a concern casually, or seek advice about something that is actually connected to his deeper emotional state. You can notice this in small ways. He might look for signs of interest in your responses, linger on compliments, or remember tiny details to see if you value him. He might occasionally seek feedback about choices he's made or his thoughts on shared experiences, not because he doubts the decisions themselves, but because he's testing whether his perspective is being acknowledged and appreciated. This isn't manipulation, it's subtle emotional testing, a way of measuring safety in connection. For someone who has felt emotionally deprived, even minor confirmation can feel like a meaningful bridge to trust. And it's important to understand that this behavior comes from habit, not intentional games. It's a learned method of gauging emotional security without putting himself fully at risk. The challenging part is that this type of reassurance seeking can appear inconsistent. Some days he may seem confident, composed, and independent. Other days, small things may trigger a quiet need for validation. And because he rarely asks outright, it can be easy to misinterpret or overlook these signals entirely. Psychologically, it's about protection. He wants connection but fears rejection. He wants closeness but fears disappointment. So he seeks reassurance indirectly, watching for signs that it's safe to let his guard down. Understanding this behavior allows you to respond with patience, attention, and gentle support. You don't need to solve or fix anything. You simply need to notice, acknowledge, and create space where he feels safe to express himself fully. Over time, repeated validation in small, consistent ways can help him learn that his feelings, needs, and presence are genuinely valued. This sign is subtle because it is quiet and indirect, but for someone who has been emotionally unfulfilled, it's one of the most telling indicators that he's been craving recognition and trust. Another subtle sign a man has been emotionally unfulfilled is how he responds to emotional intimacy over time. Even when he shows affection, listens, or participates in shared moments, there's often a quiet hesitation. He may be physically present but emotionally reserved, holding part of himself back without consciously realizing it. This is not about a lack of love or care. It's about learned caution. He has experienced repeated disappointment or misunderstanding, so his instinct is to regulate his emotions carefully. Even in safe moments, he may avoid vulnerability because it feels risky. You might notice that he struggles with expressing excitement, fear, or sadness fully. He may smile, laugh, or joke, but the depth of feeling seems muted. Important conversations about hopes, dreams, or fears may remain brief or surface level. This is his way of protecting himself from emotional exposure. Small gestures can reveal his inner world if you pay attention. A lingering look, a quiet touch, a moment of shared laughter can indicate trust building slowly beneath the surface. But these moments are often subtle and easily overlooked by those expecting dramatic displays of emotion. He may also avoid making long-term emotional commitments too quickly, not because he doesn't care about the relationship, but because he's been conditioned to fear disappointment. He tests emotional safety carefully, sometimes without realizing it. A man who has been emotionally unfulfilled often relies on actions rather than words to show care. He may remember small details about your life, anticipate needs, or take practical steps to support you. These behaviors signal connection, but they are measured, controlled, and cautious rather than fully expressive. Over time, with consistent reassurance and emotional safety, these guarded behaviors can slowly soften. He may begin to open up more freely, express deeper feelings, and allow himself to fully experience connection. But this process requires patience and understanding. It's important to recognize that these subtle patterns are not signs of indifference or coldness. They are survival mechanisms learned over years of emotional neglect or disappointment. Understanding them allows you to approach the relationship with empathy and create an environment where emotional expression feels safe. Ultimately, the key to noticing an emotionally unfulfilled man is attention to small details. The way he moderates his reactions, the careful way he shares thoughts, and the subtle testing of emotional safety. These patterns, while quiet, reveal a deep history of unexpressed needs and guarded emotions that only emerge with trust, patience, and consistent support.